Doug is a really smart guy. Don't get me started on that. Jayden Daniels, the #2 overall pick, has already wowed the group there in Washington with his arm and more. You see him out there. Dan Quinn's team may be cooking with some fire, okay? Here's more from Daniels' star wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, on the rookie quarterback.
His touch on the D balls is amazing. I love getting extra reps after practice with him, with just catching the top end of a deep ball. That's big for me. I get to track the ball over my shoulder, and it's big for him to be able to get used to dropping the ball in the bucket.
Going out there and putting not just myself but everybody in the best position to be successful, playing to guys' strengths. Obviously, we're installing, the base offense, base game plan, but, Cliff wants us to go out there and be successful at the end of the day.
Perspicacious, if you will. Dan, what should the Commanders' plan be for Jayden Daniels in this offense?
One of my favorite things about Jayden and his tape from this past year was how good he was at getting through progressions. And one of the reasons why I love progression-based pass offenses is quarterbacks don't have to overthink so often. They don't have to be perfect with knowing what the coverage is pre-snap and post-snap. And that's why Jayden had the fastest eyes in this draft. Now, that's not necessarily Cliff Kingsbury's past when it comes to the pass game. So it's going to be really big for him to realize that is Jayden's superpower in many ways and build a pass game offense that is based upon that. Because the one thing that you can do, or one of the things that you can do to get a rookie quarterback that's going to be playing behind an average, if we're putting it nicely, offensive line, to play faster is to lean in the thing that he does best. And what he does best is not get stuck on number 1, not get stuck on number 2 or number 3. Like, he can get through stuff. I think the more that they lean into that, build their pass game around that, the faster their quarterback will play, the better their offensive line will block, and the more they'll get the ball into their playmakers' hands.
Dan, what you're talking about there is Jayden Daniels' perspicacity, because he does have the ability to have a ready insight into things and adjust on the fly. And when you talk to people around the Commanders, that's the thing they keep talking about. He can get us in and out of plays. He can adjust to things that he sees. He played so much college football at the quarterback position. There are things they have to teach him in order to get him up to speed as a very good to great NFL quarterback. But he has these instincts. He has the ability to kind of maneuver in and out of situations, and so far he has demonstrated that on a level that has them very, very encouraged.
We've got verbs, nouns, adjectives, all kinds of things. Watch out, Dan. I'm scared for you.
Yeah, look, no shot.
Even with a rookie quarterback, though, as good as Jayden Daniels, what are some concerns that you still have about this Commanders offense?
Well, I'm going to do my favorite Dan Orlovsky here. I'm going to give you 12 things to watch for. Okay, here we go. Number 1. No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to give you 12. I'm going to just give you 1. Listen here. I think Jayden Daniels is part of this new breed of quarterback. And I know we all have concerns about the offensive line. I truly get that. They're average at best. But I think because of his athletic ability and because of how he came up in the game, they'll be able to overcome that. Think about this, Dan. Remember back in the day when you had a rookie quarterback? Go back to Big Ben's days. You had to protect the quarterback. I mean, you had 7, 8-man protections, and now the quarterback felt safe. Well, it's kind of turned, and Joe Burrow taught me this. I grew up playing 7-on-7, so I'm more comfortable when I can see space. So rather than condense the formations, open the formation up where I can see everything. I can see the receivers. I can see the coverage. And more importantly for Jayden Daniels, I can also see the running lanes when I get ready to take off and run the football. So I think this is an offense, even though the offensive line being average, they need to open the offense up, allow him to see the space. Yeah, they're going to blitz him, but they're going to be very cautious because of his athletic ability. I think he is set up to perform at a very high level because he came up in this 7-on-7 era where the field is wide open, and if they open the offense up in Washington, he will be able to do the same thing because that's what they grew up doing, seeing a ton of space in front of him.
I hear.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be a very interesting season with Jayden Daniels, with Cliff Kingsbury and Quinn. You guys all know that I'm super high on offensive head coaches. But in this instance, considering what the Commanders have been dealing with for the years, quite honestly, I think that this is such a perfect blend because you have a great young offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury, and I think he's kind of perfectly suited to help out with Jayden Daniels, because he knows what it's like to kind of have this quarterback, like I always say, toolbox that has a lot of tools in the toolbox, which is who Jayden Daniels is. And Cliff Kingsbury has now already had that. I'm not saying that they're similar or exactly the same in terms of Kyler Murray, but he's made his mistakes. He's helped grow Kyler, and as I said, and he's also made mistakes with him. So this is kind of a perfect situation to kind of now have this other opportunity to only have to be an offensive coordinator. So he only has to worry about the offense. And again, Cliff Kingsbury is a very adaptable person. Like Dan Orlovsky said earlier, like, oh, he doesn't, he needs to understand what Jayden Daniels does, well, and adapt that to his thing. And he kind of questioned whether or not maybe Cliff Kingsbury would do that. And I think it would be like without a doubt, because I also think that's where Quinn comes in now, which I think is going to be great because he is a brilliant defensive mind, right? We always talk about offensive geniuses, Sean McVay and, Shanahan and Ben Johnson. We very rarely talk about that from a defensive coordinating position. I mean, of course, like the big, true diehard football fans will obviously know a lot of these defensive coordinators, but you don't see it typically talked about in media. They don't always say like, oh, Spags is a defensive genius. Quinn is a defensive genius. You hear more commentators bring it up, right? You'll hear Troy Aikman make a statement about, Quinn being brilliant, an amazing defensive coordinator, but you don't hear it in like the common conversations in here. And that's where I think he will absolutely help with Jayden Daniels, because I think he'll be able to do in a lot of ways what Bill Belichick did to Tom Brady and said, this is how I'll stop you, right? Like, this is how I would stop you. So again, if you're going to have a defensive head coach, you better hope that he is elite, that he is a true defensive genius, which I think it's safe to say that that's who Quinn is. So that's when you really have, if you just have like a pretty darn good defensive coordinator who then turns into a head coach, I think that's a little bit more limited. But I think Quinn is on that next level, and it's perfectly balanced now with a true offensive mind in Cliff Kingsbury. So I think that bodes well for Daniels, and I think if their offensive line continues to be poor, they'll be able to find a way around it, or a way to, maybe not completely stop the holes from leaking through, but they'll find a way to kind of manage it a little bit better than, say, years past, or if they just didn't have Quinn and Kingsbury. So I think they are going to design this offense to make things as simple as they can for Daniels. And I've said this really with lots of quarterbacks. They the Kansas City Chiefs want to make it simple for him. But I think sometimes we get excited with what a quarterback can do. And as I said earlier, the whole toolbox metaphor, and they just want to be able to use every single tool they can. And that's when you run into problems as well. It's like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And again, that's where I actually think when you have such a brilliant defensive head coach now, they're able to kind of maybe pull that back a little bit. They could be like, okay, I know he can do that, but we don't need him to do that. Okay, we don't need him to do that. I'm getting this defense going well. Like, we don't need it. And that's why I think Spags was helped to also balance out Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, because they were able to be like, yo, this defense is really good. Our offense is lacking. We can't have Patrick Mahomes force the ball down the field just because he wants to be Patrick Mahomes. We have to be a little bit more reserved. And obviously that worked out great, and they won a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that that's exactly what's going to happen with the Commanders, because to me, I don't really know what the Commanders are going to 100% look like this season. I don't think anyone does. We can use what happened last season and some of the players, but there's completely different coaches right now and a completely different quarterback. It's a new world right now in Washington. So I don't even think we can even use past judgments and what we saw them do in the past as even an indicator of what this will look like. I really believe that. I don't think we really truly have any idea, quite honestly. I could see the Commanders actually righting this ship a lot quicker than maybe people believe. What does that mean? Honestly, I don't know. I really, really don't. But I could see them being a lot better, or I could see them going through some legitimate growing pains, and it's like, all right, they're on the right track, but it's going to be another year, right? It's going to be the next year before they can really start to make a true dent and start being a true contender. So I'm excited to see what they become. Jayden Daniels is definitely someone that's exciting to root for, right? He's definitely the type of quarterback that you like to see succeed. And same thing with their coach staff. Like, it's always nice to see, Kingsbury had like a one-way ticket to like Thailand or something. Like, I think he was used as a scapegoat in Arizona, and I think Kyler Murray was probably brutal to deal with. And I think he's just going to be in a significantly better environment, which I think he'll be able to succeed there. And same thing with Quinn. I think Quinn has proven to be a great defensive mind and a great head coach, quite honestly. He probably lingered in Dallas longer than he even needed to. So I think there's really good things to come for Washington, and I'm really excited to see what they try to make their offensive identity around Jayden Daniels, especially if Quinn can get that defense going really well. Like, if he can really make moves on that defense, because that's obviously what he knows best, it's going to be really interesting to see of like, okay, how do we approach what we do with Jayden now? We know we don't need Jayden to be Superman, or we know we don't need to put up 28 points. What does that mean? How do we use that? Because Jayden, of course, being as great athletically as he is, like, sometimes you get excited at the prospect of these like video game numbers and some of the things you can do. But like I said, when your defense is sound, you don't need that. So I'm really curious to see how this all unfolds. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Jayden Daniels and the Washington Commanders? How do you think that they'll approach their offense? And do you think that they can, truly start to compete for, titles sooner than later? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.